Hi, everyone, and welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Today, we're going to talk about what's being termed as the next generation of farming. And here to fill us in on this vision as it relates to livestock production is Carel de Marchie Sarvaas. I hope I said that right, Carel.
You certainly did.
Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you. It's great being here, and thanks for Feedstuffs 365 for inviting me.
So let's start by having you tell us a bit about yourself and about your organization.
Sure. HealthforAnimals is the global animal health association. So we represent the top 10 global corporations around the world which produce animal health products. And that ranges from vaccines to parasiticides to diagnostics devices, antibiotics, and so on, the full gamut. And we represent the 10 companies and 29 associations around the world, and companies operating in about 120, 130 countries, we estimate. About 85% of the global animal health industry. That's who we represent.
So you folks have come out with it was a couple months ago now, but a report, a study, so to speak, that really looked at how animal health related technologies, how they can meet some of the objectives when it comes to, some of the issues, say the environment, for instance. And one of those technologies you identified was vaccines. How can you kind of walk us through that? How can vaccines help to play a role in environmental sustainability?
Sure, and it's a really good question, and thanks for the question, Sarah. No, I mean, what's been happening in the last 5 or 10 years, and what we expect to happen in the next 5 or 10 years, is a real shift in animal agriculture, in the sense of people or farmers moving to much more to vaccination. And the reason for that is, I think, threefold. One reason is that there's obviously a pressure to reduce the use of antibiotics. We can talk about that later, but also there's this increasing capacity to increase animal health at much greater levels than it already is. And that's just the healthier an animal is, the less disease it gets, the more productive it is. And that's just common sense, to vaccinate so that these, as many animals as possible are as healthy as possible, to increase their environmental footprint. And I think the environmental theme is the one that's kind of dominating the world right now. Environmental production is really important. So, if we can just keep it healthy, more productive, that already is a huge step toward more productive animal agriculture.
What about the importance of more individual animal care as opposed to, treating a whole group or a whole herd?
Yeah, and that's certainly part of the picture as well, and that's where you get into digital tools as well, and digital diagnostics, for example. So nowadays we can actually very quickly identify and diagnose diseases much faster than we did before, and also doing it digitally, for example, through heat sensors or through behavior sensors or through tags. And that means that you can identify these diseases or potential diseases in groups of animals, and then keep small groups of animals, take small groups of animals out of the larger groups and treat them, whether they're sick already with antibiotics or preventively, if possible, or whether it's a parasiticide treatment. So the technology is catching up very quickly with the technology that exists already in the human health side. And so we have the capacity really to kind of treat much faster and much better.
Much more accurately in terms of those that are sick that get the treatment, and those that are healthy are not being excessively treated just because it's easiest to treat them all.
That's put better than I put it myself, Sarah.
So where are we at in this digital technology? The big picture. Are we like 10% where we, the potential? Are we crossing that 50% line, or are we like really where we need to be at this point? How is that, kind of what's that timeline look like?
I think we're at the 10%. I think it's just starting right now. And I mentioned some of the things like tags or sensor technologies, but there's so much more. It's kind of a mix of predictive monitoring and diagnostics at individual and at group or herd or flock level. And it's going to revolutionize animal care. It already is in some larger operations. So collecting data and then assessing that through algorithms will allow you to give much more precise, much earlier treatment of animals. And I think if you look at sensor techniques, especially, that's the one area where there's huge scope, not just for improvement of the specific techniques and application of them, but particularly through application of them in large scale and smaller operations. And that's where there's so much happening now. Also, maybe worth mentioning, traceability of food is something that's also very important. And with technologies like this, the traceability of food is just is much, much easier.
Are we a little limited by, say, Wi-Fi connectivity in some of these rural areas?
Yeah, but that's always going to be an issue, which needs, we always need better fiber optic cables and higher. I mean, even in calls like this, I'm sure we've got problems. No, you're absolutely right. But of course, there are ways around that, and that benefits not just the animals, but of course the people who live there as well. But that's a problem that's easily overcomable. And when you get into 4 or 5G technology, you can do things which you can't do right now with most people operating still under 3G technology.
So when you look at the whole world on a global basis, of course, do you see the digital technology evolution starting in one part of the world first, or is it pretty much uniform across the globe?
Well, predictably, I think the richer countries are ahead of the poorer countries. So where there is more investment in animal agriculture, the technology is rolling out faster, and also larger operations where larger production operations I think are moving faster than smaller operators. But that's going to change as well as the technology becomes more affordable. And I think there's also a real drive from organizations like the FAO, the World Food and Ag Organization, and others like the Gates Foundation, private partners, driving to kind of help apply these digital technologies in less developed countries. That's where possibly the people could benefit the most, because there's so much catch-up growth to do there, and in terms of disease prevention and disease treatment and so on. So I think you'll see a lot of, and we're seeing it already, a lot of investment from global organizations like the ones I mentioned, or the World Bank, but also large producer groups to invest in those developing countries and technologies in those countries. But overall, you've got to say that both in the animal, let's say the livestock production side, but also on the pet side, most of those technologies are being applied in there where there is more wealth.
So we've talked technology. Let's talk nutrition, because of course, feed and feeding are certainly probably part of the equation as well, are they not?
Absolutely, and there's so many different elements to the feed side as well. I mean, to mention a couple of trends. One is that better nutritional supplements in feed, like probiotics or prebiotics, are rapidly growing. And these obviously offer kind of the opportunities to strengthen the natural immunity of the animals. But there's a host of other benefits. For example, and this is a very big current subject, is the need to reduce the use of antibiotics, and using better feed for more efficient feed conversion is, I think, something which ultimately means that the animal is more sustainable. And that's what consumers are looking for. They're looking for increased levels of sustainability and of sustainable production. And it also means that in animal health companies and in wider feed companies, there's a lot of R&D going on how to do that, how to produce these types of natural supplements, nutritional supplements in feed, but also how to source more locally. That's also one of the pressure points, I think, on feed we're seeing from certain groups in society.
So we reduce the footprint of hauling things across a country or something like that when you talk about sourcing local, right?
Yeah, or we reduce or we produce feeds in places where it where you can add supplements to them, but you produce them closer to where they're consumed because of those technologies. And it's not just because it's far away that it's bad. Sometimes people say that. Sometimes it's production closer to home is not necessarily better production. Sometimes production further away from home is much more efficient because of scale and different things like that. Climate. Let's start with that. Soy production in the Americas is obviously where soy is done, and most of that's transported to Asia and Europe, or most of it, a lot of it, for feed. It's about how that's done in the most efficient manner and the most sustainable manner. And efficiency and sustainability go hand in hand.
Some people, we were just at the National Cattlemen's Association meeting, and the question was asked about how do you define sustainability? And I believe it was close to 30% of folks couldn't even define what that would mean. Do you find that to be a general trend in terms of, there's still a lot of confusion out there in terms of what some of these terms mean? And
Oh yeah. This is such a complicated area, but it needn't be. I mean, you can look at it from a micro or from a macro view. A micro view, which is it's not the full picture, says that it's sustainable because it's close to home. Well, as I explained, that's not necessarily always the case, and usually not the case. But we look at it from a macro point of view, which means ultimately, how do you maximize output with minimal inputs? And inputs are things like water or feed or supplements, things that pesticides, parasiticides. How do you maximize the output in livestock so have the healthiest, best possible outputs from livestock with the least amount of inputs? And that means producing efficiently. And so that's one side sustainability. Of course, there's social sustainability as well, which is important increasingly. There's the environmental aspect, which I just explained. But you can't be sustainable without being economically sustainable as well. You need to have, so it's three sides to it. There's economic, environmental, and social sustainability, and environmental sustainability, excuse me. And those you have to have all three of those for something to be longer term sustainable. And it's getting the balance between those three right, which is, I think, the challenge, and how to do that. The technology we talked about are really helpful for those to achieve that type of sustainability.
Well, and as the industry looks at, adopting this innovation and exploring new things, there's always some barriers. So how do we get around those barriers? How do we successfully navigate those barriers?
Yeah, barriers. Well, our industry has its own particular barriers, which are, we're developing a lot of R&D and technology, which is new. And all of or most of what we develop goes through some sort of regulatory approval system, and those are different around the world. One of the barriers is that there's scope for more cooperation between regulators around the world, because the more they cooperate and harmonize procedures and processes, the easier it is for everybody. One of the barriers is also that some of our technologies are so new that people don't really know. There's no experience on how to assess them. So you literally see, we have conversations with regulators who are scratching their head trying to figure out how should we assess this, and do we need to assess this? Other barriers are trade barriers. Sometimes there's a protectionism, moving a vaccine from produced in one country but used in another country. Not the easiest thing in the world, and those are just two barriers. The only way is to talk with people and to try and explain what the benefits are of working together, of aggressively trying to take down barriers together, and what the benefit is for humanity and for animal welfare. And so that's what we do. We spend a lot of time talking to people, trying to show them that our technologies, new technologies, innovative technologies are good, that they're safe, and that we need to address those barriers together.
Well, like here in the United States, it's probably somewhat the same in Europe. We never know which agency is regulating which technology. I mean, Sometimes there's some of that back and forth, which causes a lot of confusion.
Well, I'm actually struggling right now with, and I'm not going to mention any countries or technologies, but we're having conversations as we speak with different regulators about which of 4 different agencies something should be assessed by. And each of the agencies feels it should be there. So who knows?
Keeps life interesting, that's for sure. So now next month, I think it's in September, the United Nations convenes its Food Systems Summit. How do you see animal agriculture, health for animals? How do you see, some role in that, or some, advisory, or are you just monitoring from afar? What's exactly taking place?
Yeah, so the UN Food Systems Summit, I think it's 23 or 24 September. They haven't set the official date yet. We just had the pre-summit in July in Rome at the FAO. And out of that, some of the initial kind of lines and expectations have become clear. We think the UNF Food Systems Summit can be a positive thing, that it can have positive impact. Unfortunately, what we've seen so far is that there's a lot of different groups vying for a seat at the table, and that the outcomes we've seen so far are not particularly promising. But we think this can be changed. We think the focus should be really on innovation, and how innovation and technology can help humankind produce more sustainable food for everybody. And let's remember, 800 million people are not eating enough every day, and that's got to be the core focus, together with sustainable production. So there's a lot of noise about the Food Systems Summit. Some of it's noise. Some of it is some of the outcomes we hope for are going to be positive. There are all kinds of underlying conflicts in the Food Systems Summit. We are actively engaged in the Food Systems Summit together with the global food and livestock producing groups. We're trying to give positive input there, and we're hopeful that something good will come out of it.
Do you think that there will be something that comes out of it that will really influence overall policy, or is it more just an initial discussion? What's long term with what's going to happen here in September?
Well, the Food Systems Summit is not going to lead to a legally binding treaty. If you look, for example, in climate change, there's the World IPCC. That's a legally binding treaty, which I believe the States has now signed as well, and that sets all kinds of targets and things to do and achieve, led by governments. The Food Systems Summit is going to be a set of ideas and recommendations and thoughts for a better world. And many of those will be good thoughts and ideas and recommendations, and some of them I'm sure will not be. And it's an awareness raising exercise more than anything about the importance of producing sustainably. And so I think there will be some valuable things coming out of it, but most of it's about creating awareness. And what's good about it also, I must admit, is that they have involved the private sector. They have involved the NGO sector, the civil society groups. And that's good, I think, bringing everybody together. What's less good is that many governments don't feel particularly tied down by anything that's going to come out of the Food Systems Summit, because it's not going to be legally binding.
Do you think it can be objective and scientifically based and kind of really set some realistic goals, or is that like a pie in the sky kind of thinking when you get all these kinds of groups together?
It is a little bit pie in the sky. Let's be honest. There are so many different interests at stake here. There are people who believe that we should not be consuming animal sourced foods. I mean, they have a seat at the table. Vegan, and would like that everybody would think like that, and can be quite, let's be polite here, proactive in pushing that view onto other people. There are people whose priority, and this is a large part of the world, is literally producing enough food so that people can eat enough and get enough nutrients. Again, it's 800, who knows, more people suffering from some form of malnutrition. Again, we believe that should be the priority, producing enough sustainably for enough people, and doing it in a way which is equitable for everybody. So developing world, developed world. That's our priority. And our priority is to help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, which is a whole set of goals the UN has set. Everybody agrees on those goals. And so everybody's got the bit that they have to do. We have to produce innovative products which help livestock industry produce sustainably. That's our job. That's what we're doing, hopefully.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time here today, Carel. Great discussion, and I'm sure we'll be hopefully swinging back and touching base with you as things progress on the international discussion side of
Sure.
the equation. So thank you
Thank you
again.
so much for Feedstuffs 365.
Appreciate that. So for Feedstuffs 365, I'm Sarah Muirhead.